When it comes to the current culture war that is forcing people who normally ignore politics to pick one side or another, rare are the people who will resist that tribal ultimatum. Rare are those who understand there's a time and place for liberalism, idealism, and empathy, and there's also a time and place for conservatism, pragmatism, and tough love. Heather Heying and Bret Weinstein are two of those rare people who know how to calibrate between these two polar but necessary opposites. They've experienced firsthand when a woke social justice mob sets their eyes on a target after they lost their jobs as biology professors at Evergreen State College back in 2017. All because they had the courage to call off the misguided demands of student activists who insisted white people stay at home for a day as some form of protest. Somehow these students felt they were doing something noble and heroic by flipping the script on one of the college's traditions known as a day of absence, where faculty and students of color would not go to school so others would acknowledge their presence through their absence. There's a great documentary by Benjamin Boyce, which I've linked down below, that covered these unfortunate events in great detail. One of the worst being the absence of coverage by many mainstream news outlets that didn't want to tell Bret and Heather's side of the story. Because that, of course, would flip the script on the anti-conservative, demonstrably false victimhood narratives that so many outlets have been peddling to get their progressive politicians of choice elected and re-elected. Considering they live in Portland, Oregon, one of the epicenters for so many protests and riots, where groups like Antifa get their way more often than not, Bret and Heather almost function like canaries in the coal mine of social justice, especially in their rational, dispassionate, and often humorous analysis of all this unnecessary unrest. And since they're biology professors, they deliver incredible insights on the evolutionary function of social justice, which exists for a reason, because human history has been horrible to everyone. And when it comes to American history, we're clearly living through an evolutionary growing pain. From slavery to the Industrial Revolution to the labor and civil rights movements, it seems like we're doomed to another political pendulum swing, where some people are hell-bent on righting the wrongs of the past through retribution. But it doesn't have to be this way. Just because you can't have creation without destruction doesn't mean destruction is always necessary, and much less guaranteed to lead to something positive after the dust settles. And by the way, scientifically speaking, matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed, according to the first law of thermodynamics. Matter and energy just transfers from one form to another, and this process happens constantly, thanks to the perpetual motion of atoms that make up everything in the universe. Hence the saying, the only constant in life is change. But then again, not everyone seems to know this, nor arrives at these conclusions about reality after carefully thinking things through. And there are bad faith actors willing to exploit this unstoppable process of change by weaponizing many people's goodwill, often for monetary gain as well as retribution. While it's bad enough this crucial point is ignored by most corporate media outlets, especially CNN, MSNBC, CBS, PBS, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and so many others, Heather and Bret not only talk about it with no hint of revenge in their voice, but they break this down in scientific terms that we can only hope would change more people's minds for the better. But there are certain people whose minds will not be changed because they stand to selfishly gain from all this chaos. And with the latest news regarding one of the founders of Black Lives Matter, Patrisse Cullors, purchasing a 5th luxury home despite claiming she's a trained Marxist and having rubbed elbows with a socialist dictator such as Nicolas Maduro from Venezuela, it's clear the very people pushing all the chaos and disinformation stand to lose too much to admit to their wrongdoing. Yet I fear this is all par for the course in human relations. After all, the very fabric of reality is the random and perpetual motion of atoms that make up everything in this universe. And I would love to have a conversation with Bret and/or Heather regarding my crackpot hypothesis that all this chaos and change, which we understandably perceive as violence and at times injustice for some, is really just the evolution of matter and energy being in a constant state of change. And what we label as creation and destruction is just the ebb and flow of chaos and order, which we interpret as life and death, pleasure and pain, love and hate, all evolving into maternal and paternal impulses and ultimately the very liberal and conservative divide we can't seem to calibrate between. But whether I ever get to speak to Bret or Heather, I will continue tuning into them when I can't seem to filter through all the chaotic noise resulting from this current evolutionary step we're collectively taking as a nation. Because not only have I discovered that most corporate media outlets will get the reporting wrong, sometimes intentionally, more importantly, many of their talking heads will never have the insights and first-hand experience these two biologists have to offer on the subject of social justice and this current chapter of human history. Thanks for watching.